since January. Now, this topic that we are discussing today came about as a result of our discussion that we had on South Africa in 2024, February, that our analysts make the prediction that South Africa was going to lose the ANC was going to lose its dominance over the political landscape in South Africa, right? Then it was also as a result, 2 weeks ago, we had another discussion on DR Congo, right? Where they still having issues with trying to form a government over there as a result of what Tshisekedi having a minority in terms of 69 members of parliament. So these are some of the issues that came up for us to get this topic going today, right? So we are going to look at what is actually happening on the African continent, just based on what we are seeing, what is happening in South Africa and what happened in DR Congo, right? So to help us delve into the issue today, we have Dr. Antiseni, who's a political science professor and the Director General of the Economic, Social and Environmental Council of Senegal. She's joining us from Dakar, right? You are welcome, Dr. Antiseni.
Thank you, Dr. Akwa. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'm saying hello to everybody who's watching and listening to us. Saying also hello to the other panelists as well.
All right, thank you very much. And also we have Dr. Koko Nyama, who's a senior professorial lecturer of International Service, American University, joining us from Washington, D.C. So you're welcome, Dr. Nyama.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Sure, thank you. So Dr. Machar will join us later on. For those of you joining us for the first time, right, this program is organized by Bell Associate Consulting Limited in partnership with Budget IT. Now, the topic that we'll be discussing is multi-party democracy, political entrepreneurs, and the challenges coalition government in Africa, right? So Dr. Antiseni has been involved in elections in Senegal, so she will bring her own personal experience about what happened in Senegal. Then we shall look at what happened in DR Congo and what is currently happening in South Africa in terms of how they are going to form a coalition government, right? So what we do is that we normally use what we call narratives, right? Narratives we know are part of African culture, right? And our narratives are normally based on research or based on policy, based on realities in various African countries. So I set the narratives in advance to our panelists, right? For them to take a look at the narratives and be able to prepare their submissions. But the questions are not sent to them in advance. So we're supposed to start with Dr. Machar, right? In terms of what? The narrative or the history of the development of political parties in Africa, right? He said he's going to join us very late. So I don't know whether you mind, Dr. Nyama, would you mind trying to help us, right, educate our listeners in terms of what? The development of political parties in Africa. I'll just read something briefly, they can make a comment on that.
Sure.
All right, so based on what I see to you, right, it said what? 3 different scenarios will be the same for the development of political parties in Africa. 1, parties established before independence, parties that emerged from liberation movements, and parties established by military regimes. So I sent you the name of an author, right? He gave us 3 scenarios under which political parties develop in Africa. Parties that were established before independence, parties that emerged from liberation movements, and parties that were established by military regimes. Can you please explain to our listeners around the world how these political parties developed from the 1950s to 1960s up to now? Can you give us your understanding of what the author was trying to do?
So yeah. So I read the narrative that it doesn't capture everything, but it's a good place to begin. Political parties, as with all political institutions, are a function of the political systems within which they are created. And the African case, because remember, the African state itself is a modern invention, but there was African society and African political systems in place before even the colonial state are right. So the polka parties, as we have them, the modern polka parties, come out of the engagement between citizenry and the colonial authorities. And so it starts to take Ghana, for example, the contestation between the educated elite and the traditional elites and the British colonial institutions over land, the Aborigines Right Protection Society. Then it evolves into the National Congress of British West Africa. Then it keeps going. Eventually, we get our first polka party, the United Gold Coast Convention, out of that process. And so polka parties, they're just one of the many fruits of the polka tree in these societies. And they emerge, sometimes they emerge as interest groups, sometimes they are single issue groups, sometimes they emerge as ethnic affinity groups fighting for the rights of a particular set of people. Sometimes they emerge as a coalition of some sort. Sometimes they are created by political leaders. Ghana, for example, we saw what happened with the split between the UGCC guys in Nkrumah Kamsa CPP, and then what we have now, the opposition, the UP, was actually created by Nkrumah by trying to ban small parties, and they forced them together to form the UP tradition. So you have that. Then you also have the parties that were created as a function of the nationalist struggle. So nationalist struggle, these are the places where we have a lot of these parties that started off fighting for independence. They were not polka parties at first. They were sometimes they start off as militia, sometimes they start off as protest groups pushing for independence, and they evolve. And then they become these omnibus parties that bring independence and then stay on. And then we see that, CPP kicked out after the coup in Ghana, but we see parties like the ANC in South Africa. We see parties like SWAPO in Namibia, Chama Cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania. Those come out of that. Then you have the more recent creations of military dictators who are trying to transition from military hunters into polka parties, and they usually create their own parties. Because most of the time they overthrew and disrupted existing polka systems. And so when they are trying to get back in there isn't a natural home for them. And so they end up creating their own institutions. But as a vehicle for articulating group grievances and for solving problems, parties have many different things, and they do all kinds of stuff. They just reflect the polka systems within which they are created.
Okay. All right. Dr. Hunter, can you hear me? Okay, let me stay with you. If you read the narrative, right, somewhere it says what? First, the Liberation Political Party exhibits all the traits of one-party system. They are populist parties that have tried to show that they are democratic, but in reality, it is difficult to distinguish them from the government they established. Like other African political parties, they are often beset with sectionalism and ethnicity, and advance themselves through neo-patriotism, characterized by rational legal procedures, so it is making the argument that most of these parties, the way they develop, they end up being one-party system, right? Dr. Alt is saying, right? Can you give us the case study of what is happening in Senegal in terms of the current party that is in government, how it's emerged, how it developed over the years?
Thank you, Ben. Just wanted to start by mentioning that political parties, they usually the custodians of democracy. And as you mentioned, we've seen that in Africa, political parties underwent structural changes from military to one-party authoritarianism, as well as liberal multi-party systems. That for the development of actually sustainable democracy. And we've seen since the 90s that most of African party systems have been overwhelming multi-party, okay? And whenever you have two-party or actually pluralist party system that make up more than the majority of what we've seen in many countries in Africa, those are generally more democratic. I wanted to actually start by talking about in general what we've seen, and to come to Senegal, why I wanted to start in that note, because in Senegal we've seen a multi-party system since 1981, and coalitions have been winning basically from elections, and with what we recently experienced in Senegal was quite unique in terms of when we saw what has happened in the previous years preceding this year's elections. We have coalitions that have mostly young people in it, as well as people that have an ideology of changing the way things have been done in the past in terms of good governance, in how they see it, in terms of transparency, in terms of using funds properly for the youth, etc. So the party, the main party that has been in power for the past couple of years have been very present in Senegalese politics. We've seen in terms of how they were doing politics a different way than what we were used to, in terms of more violence. We've seen more violence, unfortunately, in terms of the way they wanted to send their message of change to the youth and to the population. We've seen a very different dialogue in terms of how, for instance, natural resources needs to return back to the Senegalese people, how the sense of equity, they wanted that to be shown more, and for everybody in Senegal to feel that they can have access to jobs, to a better life, as well as in general, their life being better, and especially in terms of living on a day-to-day basis, having everything being more expensive for people. So they really campaign with a very different idea of how politics should be done, mainly based on people being more than 60% with young people, and showing them and talking to them that things can be different. But that main political party won the election with others. It was a coalition of more than 250 parties that were in that coalition that won, with the president, the youngest one that we have in Senegal, 44 years old, which is the first time. But at the same time, that allow us to show, okay, because everybody was thinking that we were not going to make it based on what happened with all these situations of changing the election date and everything that went along with the candidates, our constitutional council, and all of that. But fortunately, we prevailed, and the Senegalese people went and vote and show that they wanted change instead of continuity. They wanted change with a young president. Yeah, so.
Yeah, but let me follow. Thank you. Let me follow up with Dr. Nwama about something that you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it seems like Senegal is an outlier in terms of what has happened on the African continent this year and last year based on elections, right? In Senegal, we have a new face winning an election. If you compare what happened in Nigeria, right, with Peter Obi coming in as a new force, he was not able to win the election. Or let's say there were so many things, there were so unseen hands that work against him. But if you are looking at these two countries, what happened in Senegal and what happened in Nigeria, why was Senegal able to succeed, but Peter Obi was not able to succeed in Nigeria? Dr. Nwama.
Well, it's because Senegal has a different polka tradition. And again, Senegal, this is not the first time that they've elected an outsider. Even look, going all the way back after Abdou Diop, Wade was an outsider. Macky Sall was an outsider. These are all people who come in promising change and then they don't deliver change. So Senegal has a strong tradition of throwing out, leaders that don't perform and bringing in new people who they usually underperform. They overpromise and underperform when they come to power. Nigeria doesn't have such a tradition. Nigeria's parties are also new, and then they went immediately into that power alternation thing, and so they kind of fell back into their traditional molds. And again, when we're talking about polka parties and democracy in Africa, one of the things that we should remember is the cost involved in running elections. Elections in Nigeria is very expensive. So that means that young people like Peter Obi and co, it takes them a long time to break through. Peter Obi, he himself had vacillated from one side to the other. He had ties to, Tinubu, and then he turned around. But Obi didn't do, but he got 20% for a party, a brand new party that goes for election in a place like Nigeria and getting 20%. That's good. And I hope that Peter Obi stays the course and doesn't fold and join the existing parties. He has to stay there. I was actually disappointed when I saw him in Ghana supporting that guy, Cheddar, because it says that you're not serious. I mean, how can you, as such a serious politician, go to Ghana to go and be a part of that spectacle? And so hopefully, Obi actually is the voice of young people. So Senegal gives me hope because we saw how young people in Senegal didn't abandon Sonko and they kept protesting. Even though Sonko was taken off the ballot, they still voted for his, guy, the guy that he endorsed. And this is how we make change. Young people need to get involved. They need to get off the sidelines and need to believe that if they stay motivated and organized, they can change things. But I can't even see something like that happening in Ghana. It's going to take a lot of money for anybody. So if you went to Ghana and you wanted to start a polka party, I don't know how much money you have to raise to go after the two dominant parties who have had many years of stealing government resources and making all kinds of deals, contracts with foreign businesses and local business and all that stuff. If you come in as a third force, you are really, really behind the eight ball, and you're going to have to either have independent wealth or you're going to have to find somebody, some foreign power that will fund you, which then delegitimizes you, or young people are going to have to say, we're going to vote for it, because after all, it's the voting that counts, and not necessarily how much money you have. But you're going up against established parties that have state resources and that are buying votes, that can buy media access that you don't have, but young people have other tools. And I just hope that we all learn from the example of Senegal and understand that you can make progress even when you haven't been in power for long, even when you don't have the networks that an older polka elite like Tinubu has, And even when you don't have a whole lot of money, all it takes is organization, passion, determination, and you keep pushing, and you can make change.
All right, thank you very much. Let me come back. Let me follow up again with you, Dr. Antar. You brought up the issue of coalition, right? I want us to compare the two situations that happened in DR Congo and South Africa. In South Africa, we had the ANC as a dominant party. Even though there were polls showing that South Africa was going to lose its dominance over the political landscape, the ANC still refused to form a coalition, either with the MK or probably with EFF, right? They still, I don't know what they were thinking. They're thinking that they could still win the election. But if you go to DR Congo, right, it was a new political party, not the Kabila's party. It was a new political party that formed an alliance before they went into the elections. So the alliance was formed, or the coalition was formed before they went into the election. So they had what they call a united party. Why didn't South Africa also follow the ANC follow the same footsteps in terms of forming the coalition party first or united party first, either with the MK or probably with the EFF before going for the election, right? As compared to what happened in the DR Congo. What could be the reason why? Was it that the ANC was still with a mindset that it could win the elections, even though polls were saying that, no, they couldn't win the election because corruption is high, unemployment is high, they were not able to deliver services. So all these things were there in their face, but still they went ahead not to form the coalition first before they went into the election. What could be the reason why?
Thank you so much, Dr. Akwet. So I wanted to mention and share with Dr. Nwama that I quite disagree with the fact when he said that when you have new political leaders in Senegal, basically you don't see, when they come to power, they don't perform. I disagree with that because each one of them, when they come, at least they have something they have done for our country, whether it's Abdou Diouf or President Abdoulaye Wade or President Macky Sall. I'll start with President Macky Sall. It's important to mention these things because, yes, outsiders are the ones that we've seen, because after 2 terms, you see that people want change, and it's something natural because they want to see new people taking the lead. They believe in those who promise to them better lives and change. But if you see with Macky Sall, he worked a lot of infrastructure. And here in Senegal, we've seen a huge difference. Everybody agreed, despite political differences, that in terms of infrastructure, President Macky Sall has done an excellent job, something that we never thought about that will happen, I can say, because we have the TER, which is the regional train, which is very fast. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the first in West Africa that we have, and the first in our country. It costs a lot of money, but today all Senegalese people are happy because those who live in the peripheries now can take that and come to the city with no problem. We also have recently the rapid bus transit, which is electrical. So that was also done in President Macky Sall during his time, and many others. If you come here and you use and you go from the north to the south, the roads are so much better. You will think that, wow. And that's what Macky Sall done. President Abdoulaye Wade also for his 10 years done all he could as well in terms of even the cultural impact on Senegalese. Abdou Diouf the same when it comes to reforming the administration. So I just wanted to mention that before we continue, that they're outsiders yet, but they do perform when they come. But like all But democracies or countries, of course, it might not be enough for the citizens after a couple of years. But
yeah, but he made a very interesting statement that Senegal has taken over from Ghana as the shining star of democracy in Africa. But it used to be Ghana, based on what happened in Senegal. He's making the argument that.
Ben, if you want me, can I clarify what I was saying before she continues?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm not talking about delivering in terms of projects. I'm talking about democracy, the commitments they made. So I remember when Wade came to power, he was a strong advocate of democracy. He joined NEPAD, all that stuff. And then he tried to stay on. So these are people that come in, they are activists, democracy activists, and then they try to subvert the democratic project. So Wade, at the end, he was trying to hang on. And even Macky Sall, it wasn't clear whether he was trying to hang on or not. In the end, he didn't hang on. But that's what I'm saying. So they come in as people who are fighting for democracy and constitutionalism. And then at the end, Obasanjo did the same thing in Nigeria. So I'm not talking about delivering infrastructure, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the commitment to democracy and the rule of law. So if you come in saying that this is what I'm going to do, I don't want to hear at the end of your term that you are even considering not living, because then that reopens the whole stuff. So because I was a big Wade guy, I expected a lot more from him. You know, he is one of the founding fathers of NEPAD. In the end, he abandoned NEPAD, and then he tried to hang on. And so that's what I meant. I didn't mean that they didn't deliver infrastructure. I'm talking about governance and commitment to the rule of law and the commitment to the term, the constitutional term limits, because that's one of the problems that Africa deals with.
Yeah, so he's making the argument within the context of promoting democracy dividends, right? The benefits of democracy. Go ahead.
Right, when you talk about, that's all what we want to see in Africa, for our leaders to respect the Constitution and actually not touching those constitutions to be able to stay in power. For President Macky Sall, he didn't do that. Okay, he was very clear here in Senegal last year that he will not do a third term, because we were here when we had to actually do the referendum, and it was very clear. Maybe what happened afterwards with the election dates changing based again on corruptions from the beginning of the process made people think that maybe he wants to stay or not, but no. When he said that was it last year in July, we all knew that it was going to be that was going to be it for him. President Wade, you're right. That's when he mentioned that when they talked about his son being maybe the vice president or changing the constitution to allow that, that's when Senegalese people said, no, we don't want that. We're staying with the presidency regime, and we went on to elections, and he did not win. Macky Sall came over. But that is to say that at least here in Senegal, we that tradition of respecting and wanting democracy, despite all of these differences, despite how sometimes it's not easy, we have been able to have that reputation of a country that believe in democracy, and that's why today we're here and we can do this conference call, because a couple of weeks back, it was not that easy for us in Senegal, because this was the first time that we all of us were very concerned and wanted that reputation of good democracy to keep it, and everybody had to play a role in it for us to have elections and have a president. That was not easy. It was not evident. Everybody thought that, my God, this was going to be the first time that maybe Senegal will not be able to have peaceful and transparent elections, but we did. And that shows that the Senegalese people are very mature. They understand and know all these concepts of democracies, and they will not let anybody coming and wanting to touch the constitution for their own good. I don't think so that it will happen in our country, because people are very much so respectful to the constitution. It's 2 terms. After 2 terms, someone else comes. If you stay 2, that's fine. If not, it will be someone else. And the Senegalese people fought for that this time, for it to be respected, and it had been. Now in South
Yes.
Africa,
Yeah.
with ANC, I think they had for observers outside, we could see that it was going to be very, very tough for them to win. Again, because of how the political situation in the country for this past few weeks and years have been, and it's becoming harder and tougher for it's becoming tougher to win without having a coalition or a group of political parties with you to help you to get the president's office. No, it's coalitions that we will have that will help you to actually get there with because the major goal is to win state to have control of state power.
All right, so let me follow up with you, Dr. Nuyama, right? We are looking at a comparative case study of DR Congo and South Africa, right? In DR Congo, we know that they had to form a united government party before they went into government. Now we know that after the elections, they are finding Tshisekedi is finding it very, very difficult to build a government in DR Congo as at now. 2 weeks ago, we heard about an attempted coup d'etat, right? Now, if you look at South Africa, all the polls, everything was against the ANC, right? Youth unemployment 38%, delivery of services very bad, corruption was very, very high, right? Polls were showing that the ANC was going to lose its dominance, right? The point is, why didn't the ANC decide to go into a coalition first, right, before the elections? But now, it is now thinking about forming a coalition to build a government. Now, these two, the main two, the party that we are thinking about is going to be the EFF and the MK, right? The MK Zuma is looking for a leverage, or this is his time for revenge, right? And you're talking about what's his name, Malema, who is a social Marxist. How do you I will see a doomsday scenario in South Africa if the DA is not the option for the coalition government?
It's probably going to be the DA because Malema is not going to join the ANC. They're making demands that the ANC is not going to be able to work with. Jacob Zuma will not join because he has personal animus towards Cyril Ramaphosa, and they're going to work these coalitions out. But addressing the question that you posed, why didn't they do the coalition before? Why didn't they form an alliance? There's no reason why you do that. You want to go to the polls and see how much you win. So the ANC, and again, the DR Congo case is completely different. Felix Tshisekedi is not, he doesn't have a strong tradition over there. These are new parties that were created. Even he himself is a guy that came in from outside. His father, Etienne Tshisekedi, was the leader. They wouldn't let him in. He had been fighting from the Mobutu days, all that stuff. The ANC has been in power for all this while, but it's also the oldest liberation movement. So they have deeper roots. And so it's completely different scenarios. But if you're the ANC, there is no reason why you should form some kind of alliance before the elections, because there were no natural alliance partners. If they had those, they probably would have explored that. Remember, the EFF came out of the ANC. The MK also came out of the ANC. So these are parties that are led by leaders who have personal animus towards the ANC establishment as is, characterized by Cyril Ramaphosa. So these were not people that were going to join any type of coalition. The other thing is the DA. And the ANC is blessed to have an opposition party that is still considered a white party. So it doesn't matter how bad things are in South Africa, there are people that will never vote for the DA. The DA has to transform itself beyond white proto-apartheid ideas and become a national party. They're not there yet. So one of the things that they are fighting, and this may be a sticking point in negotiation, they're fighting the Black empowerment agenda, for example. So if you're a party that's, and it goes back to Helen Zille, who's the founder of the party, who's made racist comments. So if you're a party that's seen as a racist party, you shouldn't come out and say one of the things that we are demanding in this coalition talks is that you should stop doing affirmative action for Black people who suffered under apartheid because the ANC has mismanaged the program. You figure out how to fix that, but you don't get rid of programs like that because it then confirms what people already suspect that you are. But it's also the party of business in South Africa. And so the ANC has to balance that. But the ANC is caught between a rock and a hard place. If they go the DA, it appears as if Cyril Ramaphosa's business instincts is driving him towards that, and he's making a deal with, apologies of apartheid, and essentially a party of capitalists in South Africa has the problem of white monopoly capital. So the ANC doesn't want that spot. But with those two other parties, they're making demands that Cyril Ramaphosa cannot deal with. So the Inkondo Wezizwe is demanding that Cyril Ramaphosa should step down as president before they even consider an alliance. He's not going to do that. And so the question is, how do you navigate that? Now, the question is whether the ANC itself can maybe move beyond Ramaphosa. I don't know whether that is the case. They've done that in the past. They've done it in the past. They've got him, what's his name? Thabo Mbeki. Mbeki was the party moved on. Kwasi was still there. Jacob Zuma was coming up. So if they can do that, they can bring the MK in. I don't know whether that's possible. Then you have Malema. Malema's party didn't do as well as he thought he was going to do. So in this election, Inkondo Wezizwe that just started became number 3rd. They came in 3rd. Malema, who's making all this noise, couldn't hold on to his coalition. And so that becomes an issue. Now, I suspect that some of the policy disagreements will be ironed out. They want nationalization. They want a whole bunch of things, land appropriations. Those things are not going to happen, not with an ANC government that is weak. I think that political bargaining is good for every society. The ANC has had 30 years. They've delivered in some areas. They've not delivered on the big things that were promised. The honeymoon is over. They have to get back to the drawing board and negotiate. And they have to decide everybody's going to have to take a haircut. The DA, this is their best chance to join the government. They're going to have to jettison some of their, pro-business, pro-white ideas. Everybody's going to have to take a haircut if they want to play a role in this. But remember that South Africa has a history of a party of government of national unity before. They've done that in the past, and I suspect that that's probably what's going to happen there. But there's really no reason why you form the alliance before the elections, because that means that you are conceding that you're not going to win the election, right? And so you go in there and then you take your chances. They come up with 40% of the seats in the parliament, and they are in a driver's seat because nobody has what they have. And now they can do the bargaining. So you do that, you test, you try to see if you can win first. And then, because remember what happened before the elections, Jacob Zuma was banned.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. If Zuma had not been banned, maybe they would have won some more. So you never know what's going to happen. You don't concede till you have to, and you don't start negotiating until you know that you cannot win unilaterally. So we'll see what happens, but each party is going to have to take a haircut, and nobody gets everything in the negotiation. If the DA wants, and I suspect that it's going to be the DA, if the DA wants to join, they're going to have to reform some of the agenda. They're going to have to publicly renounce some of the things that they are asking for. The ANC is in a tough spot. They're going to take whatever deal they get. I don't think that the coalition is going to last long. It's probably for there's going to be there for a while. And, some of us, if he strikes a bad deal, may lose the ANC presidency, which then will usher in somebody else. But South Africa is in a tough spot. But as I said, with these types of POCA negotiations are good for the people, because you don't want any one POCA party taking the people for granted. If you 30 years of honeymoon is long enough. It's about time they step up, rearrange things, come up with a new program that solves problems. South Africa has real problems. So POCA's slogans are not enough. They have to come up with solutions for unemployment, for electricity, for human security problems. They have to come up with real solutions. And maybe this is the first time that they are being asked to do that, because people used to vote for them simply for nostalgic purposes. They used to vote for them for being a nationalist, liberationist party and all that stuff. Those days are gone. They're going to have to work for their votes.
Yeah, you know what? When we had the South African election situation, I want to follow up with you about something that you said, right? We had Fiwo Manyandu, right? He's the assistant director of the Center for African Studies at Howard University. He is from South Africa. Mm-hmm. When it came to this program, we were making this analysis, and they said, Ben, don't be fooled. South Africans, politicians, understand what we call crude power. And I said, what do you mean by crude power? He said, most of these politicians do not have any kind of profession themselves, right? So in situations like that, where we're talking about the EFF and what Jacob Zuma, he said, because they don't have any kind of profession themselves, when they see power and they have to join with you, even if it means dining with the devil, for them to get into government, they're going to do that. Would you agree with that analysis?
No, because being a politician is a profession. I mean, these people have 40 years, 50 years in POCA public service. So public service is a profession. Jacob Zuma, that's what he's done. He was in the anti-apartheid movement and all that stuff. So he's not going to go be a lawyer or, go start some business. But the problem that I have with Zuma is that he is driven by personal animus. He feels that the ANC didn't treat him well. But he's also overlooking the bad things that he did. There was a lot of corruption in his time. He mismanaged public funds. He didn't perform very well. So you take the people's verdict. The people judged him, and they said, we're moving on. So you take that. Maybe the way he was treated in the trial was not very respectful, and he's aggrieved by that. But this is a guy that, when he was vice president, raped somebody and got away with it. So Jacob Zuma is not the person that you feel sorry for. Now, you don't want him as a former president to be humiliated the way they try to send him to jail and all that stuff. But he even got off. He ended up not doing the time that he was supposed to do in this. So it's that personal animus that's driving him. Malema also had a problem with the ANC. Now, Malema, I would also say he's a POCA activist, and that's a profession. That's a profession. He's a POCA activist. He's committed to pushing the boundaries. He's never going to be in the mainstream of South African politics, but you still need people like that. He's more of an agitator from the edges to make sure that the ANC doesn't forget the promises they made to poor people. Because yes, South Africa has transitioned beyond apartheid, but in terms of the economic lives of majority of its people, nothing has really changed. So you need a Malema in there that's also making these noises. It's all part of how we negotiate a social contract. So you need these people there. But I would say that being a public figure, a politician, and being an activist, that is a profession. I don't think that these people are in it because they can't find other jobs. I think that they are in it because they think that this is their public service and this is their calling, and they are passionate about it. And I think that that's fine. We need people who will do that. And, Cyril Ramaphosa left politics and then he came back. He left politics, went to make a lot of money in corporate South Africa. Then he came back because Cyril Ramaphosa also has this calling. And I think that he didn't like how the transition occurred after Mandela to Mbeki. But then he came back. So these people are people who have given many of their years in the service of the state, and that too is a vocation. So I think that it's fine. It's as long as you do it well, I think it's fine.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. Let's come to let's move to the next narrative, right? The narrative or the challenge of multi-party democracy in Africa, right? In the development of competitive political parties. So I sent you the narrative, Dr. Anta, right? Now, I just want to ask some basic questions. Let me see what I have over here. Right. So you can see that the character of the African political system, some people make the argument that the character of the African political system is conducive for democratic consolidation, contrary to popular view that ethnicity and sectional interests are the bane of African political parties, right? We're talking about parties which are based on ethnicity or based on ethnic or sectional interest. That means we do, most times in Africa, you do not have one dominant political party or ethnic group that can win election on its own, or sectional interest that can win election on its own, unless it joins or it forms what is called a coalition. That in itself is good for democratic consolidation. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, Dr. Akwe, I think that political party system, they're an important element of political systems in Africa, because they form the central intermediate between the general populations and governments. And party systems represent and aggregate diverse political views and group interests. So we have to keep in mind that the political parties' major goal is actually to win control of state power. Now, you will see that when it comes to identifying with race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, for instance, in Senegal, it is strictly prohibited for a political party to identify with race or ethnicity. That is in accordance with our constitution when we had multi-partyism, okay? And you will see that even when the political parties send their documents to the interior minister, they have to express, and it has to clearly appear on the statutes of those political parties. But then we see, for instance, here that political parties have identity-based tendency. We will even have here in Senegal religious tendency, because in their speech sometimes, or political orientation, you will have that. And then, for instance, you will have more and more nowadays many Senegalese political parties being led by leaders who are also religious men. So to consolidate democracy, ethnicity should not be at the center of it. Good governance, transparency, as well as a very strong economic foundation should be what should be the drivers, okay, but not really ethnicity, even though, like I said, when you go in reality, that's what we observe more.
All right, let me follow up. Thank you for your analysis. Let me come to Dr. Ngom. Would you agree with what Dr. Anta just said? Because we know that what political party, based on your own analysis or your submission, right? They have based on ethnic leanings, or probably intersectional interest. But in Africa, for example, there's no one political party or dominant ethnic group or sectional interest that can win election on its own, except it forms some sort of coalition, right? Isn't that in itself good for democratic consolidation, where you have to form a coalition first before you win elections?
It is, but that's the same everywhere. There isn't any place where one party says we're just flying the ethnic flag, and then ethnicity is part of it, and that's okay. Ethnicity can be a part of it as long as it's not exclusionary and it's not zero-sum game. But again, in the African case, ethnicity is important because it's the state hasn't delivered for a lot of people, and then they go to the next available identity point. Because most Africans like their state, but the state doesn't provide a lot of things, and they have to get into these patron-client networks, which are usually ethnically defined, and they go in there. But it's a good thing that no one ethnic group is going to capture polka power, and they have to form coalitions, and that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing for democracy. You want polka bargaining among the elites, and you want people not necessarily picking a party just on the basis of ethnicity, even though if that's what they want to do, they are free to do that. In the United States, there are a lot of people that vote along ethnic lines. People think that that's not the case. There are a lot of people that will vote for Donald Trump because he's white. There are a lot of people that will vote for Joe Biden because he's Catholic, or at least he's not a white nationalist. He doesn't identify as a white nationalist. America has its own, polka coalitions, and that's okay. People choose what they want. After all, that's what democracy is. You choose a government that you think best represents your interest. The question is, what interest is that? Is it the interest of the ethnic group? Maybe your group feels like it's being victimized and it's being targeted, and so the ethnic group identity becomes more salient to you. Is it economic? Is it security? People choose what they want to highlight when they make these choices. The polka parties, I think that if they want to be successful, they want to broaden their agenda to touch as many people as possible, rather than pitching themselves as an ethnic party. In some places, there are laws against that. In Ghana, for example, you had the Avoidance of Discrimination Act. You couldn't really start a polka party representing one entity. But I think that even the state should not regulate that. I think that you let the polka market sort it out. So if somebody wants to fly an ethnic flag, let them fly an ethnic flag. If they can win, good for them. But if they cannot win, they will quickly understand the need to build coalitions. And that's how democracies become stronger. That's how they mature. And that's how they manage to do the interest aggregation functions that we expect them to do.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Now, in your previous submission, you made a statement in terms of funding for political parties, right? I just want to read something to you. So there's the argument that of institutionalization of political parties, right? It's the process by which democratic values and norms become deeply embedded in the organization of political parties. If you look at African countries, right, you see that political parties are not institutionalized in terms of democratic values and norms. And some of the challenges came as a result of funding and finance, party ideology, dominant party syndrome, ineffective civil society, problems of fragile institutions, right? Are these the reasons why you can make the argument that African state or democracy is quite very, very young, right? So it will take them years for them to be able to put in these democratic values into political parties. Will you agree with that? Dr. Newman?
But here's the thing. So a polka party can rise no higher than the polka culture that creates it. So to understand African polka parties and all their problems, you got to look at the polka culture underlying all of them. And our polka culture is a culture that rewards people in powerful position because of a patron-client network, where corruption is okay as long as it benefits me. That kind of stuff. So polka parties are just doing what the people literally want. Now, if that framework doesn't deliver power, the polka parties will evolve. The polka parties always respond to the challenges that come up. Look at America. The Democratic Party used to be the racist party, the Dixiecrat. These were the people in the South who were enforcing slavery and all that stuff. Then it changed. It switched quickly when a Southern president, pushes the Civil Rights Act through Congress, and the Southerners flip sides and become Republicans, and he has to build a new coalition. So the Republican Party, which was the Progressive Party, becomes under Nixon becomes the party of racism and the party of disenfranchising minorities and other stuff. So the Democratic Party has then evolved and become the party of progressives. So these are the things. But the political parties respond to challenges in the system. So African political parties are not different from political parties anywhere. If they are winning power on the basis of ethnicity and corruption, they won't change anything. That's why I said that it's a good thing that South Africa has sent a message to the ANC that the old games will not work. So the ANC now has to go back and figure out new ways of winning power, because political parties, your sole purpose is to win power. So if you don't win power, eventually you just become part of the entertainment. But if you want to win power, you need to go back and figure out how to do that. Now, financing of political parties is a separate problem. In some societies, it doesn't cost much to run elections. In other places, it costs a lot of money. And so the higher the cost, the more corrupt the politicians are. You've seen what's happening in Ghana. In Ghana, people essentially have to pay money to people to get these positions. It didn't always used to be like that in Ghana, but it's changed a little bit. And then there are places where people will vote for a political party for ideological reasons, or they vote for a political party for maybe ethnic reasons, and for religious reasons. We're going to see some of that in Ghana's election currently, because as we have two Northerners, but one Muslim, one Christian, and maybe religion plays a role in that fact. But as I said, it's not our job to tell people how to vote. It's our job to create a free and fair process, but you can't ever tell a voter how they should vote. You can give them the message and you can tell them vote for your interest, but we don't really know what is important to them. Everybody has a utility function, and they are satisfying. Sometimes they are even pursuing goals that they themselves are not aware of, or they are not able to articulate. Look at Britain. They have the shy Tory factor, where you have a lot of people that end up voting for the Tories, but they cannot even say why they support the Tory. So when you go in and you interview them, they will say, I'm going to vote, Labour, I'm going to vote Labour, and they go in and they vote Tory. I remember when Barack Obama was running for president here, you have the Bradley effect. The Bradley effect, when you interview a white person about who you're going to vote for, they feel like if they say, I'm going to vote for McCain, they are racist. And so they pretend they're going to vote for Obama. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. We can't ever get into the minds of people why they vote the way they vote. We can only present them with evidence and challenge them to put national interest ahead of their own personal interest. But citizens will vote the way they vote. What you can do is make sure that political parties are above board, that they're not collecting money from corrupt business people or foreigners, that they're not using intimidation, that they're not rigging elections, that they're not preventing their opponents from having a say. You don't want that situation. But in terms of the citizens, they're going to vote the way they feel like voting. And I think that that's their right as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Anta, if you are here. Now, let's come back to what happened in Senegal, right? I think there were how many there was a proliferation of political parties in Senegal. Can we say that the party that won the election had to go through a democratic process? The political system was fair, because we know that the president was not the actual candidate, right? He was chosen by another person to take over from him. Would you say that was a democratic process?
Thank you, Ben. Well, it's an unusual and different case, because, like you mentioned, the actual president was chosen by the one who was supposed to be the candidate for that political party. But I can share with you that, yes, it was done in a democratic way within their own political party, because the actual prime minister, like I said, was supposed to be the candidate. So within the political party, they were waiting for him to actually mention or say who will be, in case he will not be the candidate. He mentioned to all of them that I'm choosing this one for XYZ reason. And if there was any problem with that, for them to talk in between them. And they accepted. They accepted the person that he proposed. I will not say to 100% within their own coalition, because you could hear sometimes contributions from one or more people mentioning that they wanted it to be democratic, meaning maybe they needed to have the occasion to all of us sit down, the leaders, and actually have candidates and them choosing among themselves to have primaries, basically, in the coalition. So not 100% that they all agree with his choice, but at the end, they all campaigned for the current president. In the beginning, they mentioned that they wanted it to be more fair as much as possible. But since the goal was him to be president, candidate, and he was not able to because of all the trouble with our justice system that he needed to deal with. But when he designed this one, they all agreed at the end and trusted his choice of having the current president.
You wouldn't call that democratic.
Well, that's a good question to mention, to ask what we call democracy. What is the real definition of democracy? Because to some, as long as you have the main leader of the political party, actually the founder, the president of the political party in this situation designed him, they went along with it. But if you really talk about the democratic process, you will want to allow chances for other candidates within that coalition to also be able to present their program, talk about how they will want to change Senegal, and primaries being done, for instance, so they can choose the right candidate for their coalition. But in Senegal, you see that even with the coalition of President Macky Sall, we had the Socialist Party, who has been over 40 years in Senegal, was one of the main political parties, as well as the progressive one with President Niasse, were actually the main two that, along with the party of the President Sall, nominated him for him being the candidate, but they went through a whole process of having a meeting where everybody agreed and decided that among all of them, he was the one who was going to lead the coalition. That is the democratic process in that way.
Okay, all right. So let me follow up with you, Dr. Nyoma, on multi-party democracy, right? Now, if you look at Senegal, for example, they had probably like around 19 political parties. If you're looking at DR Congo had almost like 26 political parties. South Africa had a lot of political parties, right? So we see here a proliferation of political parties, right? So my question to you, the proliferation of political parties and the expansion of political space have not deepened democratization in Africa or improved the quality of governance, nor does it ensure peaceful political participation and the alienation of power. Why is that the case?
Well, before I answer that, in places where we don't have proliferation of political parties, we haven't seen better results either. And so that it's neither here nor there. The polka party numbers usually reflect the polka culture as well. And for me, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about how many parties are in the system. Let the polka marketplace sort it out. Eventually, you'll have the proper coalitions and you have the proper formula. And as long as you can win elections, then that's good. But I don't want to get rid of small parties. Small parties, sometimes they are single issue parties. They are parties that represent segments of the electorate that are neglected. You want those voices there. Even if they don't form the government, you want those voices there because they tend to bring in and they highlight issues that the mainstream parties tend to ignore. So let 100 flowers bloom in these places. But in places where you have one party dominance and all those is Uganda. They haven't had any deeper democracy over there in Tanzania, where Chama Cha Mapinduzi has been ruling since independence. Their democracy is not deeper as a result of that. So yes, eventually some of the small parties that are essentially the projects of polka entrepreneurs, they'll go away because nobody really follows them. But I don't want to get rid of parties that are highlighting small issues, environmental issues, the rights of minorities, or things like that. You want those voices out there. And in the end, you want a system that is inclusive enough so they can get some of the agenda items on the tickets of the main parties.
Yeah, you are right about that. Let the political market space determine the political party. Let me come back to you, Dr. Hunter. We've seen political entrepreneurship. We saw what happened in Chad, right? Political parties springing up, not based on ideology, they are just formed just to have leverage with the dominant political system, right? So now we saw what happened in DR Congo. It's political entrepreneurship, where they form these political parties, right, just to extract concessions from the dominant party. Will you agree with that? That is fair for the marketplace to do that. We don't need any kind of policy regulation, right? We should leave everything for the political marketplace to make that determination as to which political parties should exist or not.
Now, could you repeat the question? It was cutting.
Yeah, I'm asking that.
To mention in Senegal, you have over more than 300 political parties.
You have more than 300 political parties, right? So the point is that shouldn't there be some sort of policy to regulate that, or we should leave it for the marketplace, right? Knowing very well that we are political entrepreneurs, right, who are using political parties to extract concessions or to have some sort of leverage from the dominant political parties. They are not based on any kind of ideology or based on any issue. They don't have the capacity to finance a political party, but they are just there as political entrepreneurs to have leverage and extract concessions.
Yes, we have many of them who want leverage, political entrepreneurs, and not really having per se what it takes to be a political party. In terms of paperwork and documents that the Minister of Interior asked them, they will have that. But afterwards, it's quasi, you won't have them as strong as they should be. And that's why you see that among all of those 300 political parties, you have about roughly 10 or 15 that are predominant. Okay, so I agree with you that we should more regulate these political parties. And that comes to the institutionalization part of it, because most of the political parties, they don't really have, like values and norms that are well defined. That's a problem as well. And most of them want these parties and to use them for elections, for instance, because it's a leverage to be able to gather more funding as much as you can when you actually say you were a candidate for the presidential election. Okay, it's for that reason basically, because behind, you know that you won't even have all the necessary citizen sponsorship, because that's the system here in Senegal. You have to get enough citizen sponsors to be able to move to the next steps as being validated as candidates. So they use it as leverage. And that's when you see, for instance, this year's elections, how we had almost like more than 270, whether they're political parties or independent, wanting to be president, more than 270. And after all of their documents were verified, you had about 90 of them. But out of the 90, again, there were only 20 candidates, which is the first time in Senegal. Because usually you have about 4 or 5 candidates, or maybe 10, roughly. So that shows how people use it, leverage, to be around the table. But when it comes to, do they really have the means? Do they really have the people behind them? No. They don't.
All right, thank you very much. Now I want to give Dr. Newman, I want to give you a comparative case studies of 2 different countries, right? In terms of what we are discussing, political entrepreneur, right? So in South Africa, we had the MK, which was based in KwaZulu-Natal, which used to be the ANC stronghold. It was part of the ANC, right? So when they were trying to form the MK, the ANC was doing whatever it takes to stop the registration of that particular party, because it will go against it, right? So that's one situation. Let's go to Ghana. What is happening in Ghana, right? We are the movement for Chamber, Alan Shamantin. We know that there are inside movements, right, to stop him from campaigning because he is coming from the Ashanti region, right? And that means that if he goes to contest the elections, he might get some of the vote from the Ashanti region, thereby reducing the vote of the NPP from the Ashanti region. So these dominant political parties are cognizant of these facts, right? So they will do whatever it takes to stop these proliferation of political parties in the political system. So these are the 2 case studies I want you to analyze for us. What happened in South Africa, and what is yet to happen in Ghana?
These are undemocratic practices. Listen, if you're the ANC, you've been in power for 30 years. You shouldn't fear Jacob Zuma. If you have done what you said you would do for people in KwaZulu-Natal, you should be able to win easily. But you try to block Zuma because you know that you have not delivered in KwaZulu-Natal, and you're worried about that. It's not just Zuma that's over there. It's also Inkatha Freedom Party. That's also a Zulu party that's over there. Right. And people may support the IFP or the MK for ethnic reasons. But as I said, most people move along ethnic lines only when the state fails them. With most Africans, yes, your ethnicity is always important, but you don't think of yourself as a member of your ethnic group first. You think of yourself as a national of your country. It's when the state fails you, that's when ethnicity becomes important as an identifier. So if you've done the work that you're supposed to do, you shouldn't worry. Now, same with Ghana. If the MPP has done the work that it said it would do, then Alan Kyerematen, I don't think Alan Kyerematen poses a threat. Alan Kyerematen is testing the theory that Ashantis will not vote for a Northerner. That's the theory that he's testing. And if that is true, then it means that the NPP is not really a national party the way they think they are. It means that the rumors of them being an ethnic party hasn't gone away. And so if Alan Kyerematen, who's an old member of the party, he leaves the party because he can't win the nomination. And again, this is also part of managing the Polka party also requires the ability to make deals. So whatever grievances Alan Kyerematen had should have been handled in-house. Somebody in that party should have reached out to him and said, we hear you, we're going to create a space for you. You didn't win a nomination, but you're still an important member of the team. They didn't do that, and they allowed him to break away. He's not going to win the election, but he can be a spoiler, especially in an election where he's betting on the fact that people may not vote for somebody from the north in Ashanti. And if they lose Ashanti, I don't think they're going to lose Ashanti. If they lose Ashanti, it's going to create a problem for them. And so that's the thing. But I think that when people vote against you, when you have been in power all this while, it means that they don't like your record. Not because they like the other person better, but it's mostly a vote against you, the incumbent. So if the NPP after 8 years, if they lose Ashanti because of Alan Kyerematen, that is an indictment of their governance. If the ANC cannot win in KwaZulu-Natal after 30 years, that's an indictment of the ANC. It's not necessarily high praise for Jacob Zuma. It's an indictment of the ANC. So I have no sympathy for incumbent parties that lose, the vote to small parties, and then try to prevent those parties from operating. I have no sympathy for them at all. If you are good, you should be able to win the elections just on the basis of your record of service delivery. If you have to go and block somebody from contesting, it means that you deep down, you have not performed and you're going to lose that election.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so let me follow up, Dr. Anta, with the submission that Dr. Nneoma just made, right? Does it mean that Macky Sall's party did not deliver in the case of Senegal? That's why they didn't win the elections?
Well, in Senegal, there have been problems with President Macky Sall's political party. Instead of the leaders being united, they were not. Each one of them wanted to actually make sure that the other one will not win his own, will not win within his or her, how do you say it, within city. So the problem with his political party, I can say, was the fact that they were not united, as well as they could not really share with the Senegalese people what the president has done in terms of a realization. They were, most of them, more in tune with ensuring, unfortunately, that financially they were stable. And many of the things that were done also was not that transparent. And they were not sanctioned either. So sanctions were missing among those leaders who were from his political party that at some point had problems, and nothing was actually done against that. So the Senegalese people, in turn, wanted to really see that change in terms of impunity. Okay. But even today, you can see that his political party, you have different sides of people. Okay, we will have this person going this way, different groups, clans among the party. They're not together. They're not alone. The candidate that was chosen by the coalition did not really get the support of all the leaders. That was the main problem why he actually lost the election. He did not get the support of all the leaders within that party, because most of them also, when he was designated as being the candidate of the Benno coalition, disagree with that, because they felt that he came onto the party about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, while some people who actually founded the party since, 2009, were not the ones who were actually chosen to lead. So there was the division between those who with this candidate and those who believed that they were the founder of President Macky Sall political party. And they believed that the candidate for that coalition needed to come from those who founded the party, and not for someone who joined 3 or 5 years ago the party. So he did not get the support at all of these people who believe that the founders were the ones who needed to be candidates, not someone who can lead.
Okay, let me follow up with you on what happened in Senegal, right? Was this Macky Sall government flirting with the idea, right, of getting the current government party out of the system, right, trying to silence them? Because we know that the two leading candidates were at some point in prison. Before the postponement of the election, if the election had gone on, the president would not have contested the election. So would you say the Macky Sall government was flirting with the idea of stopping them from contesting the elections?
I think so, because even if he was still in jail, the current president, he was still a candidate among the list of the 20. Okay, he was still a candidate. So even if he was not allowed to be out to do his campaign, it was going to be even worse for the former president government, because he was going to win. Because you can see when you hear that people really wanted change. They did not want continuity anymore. So for observers, this result is not shocking, or it was not something that we did not look for. Yes, we knew that Senegalese people wanted someone else. Senegalese people believed in the youth to be able to take over and actually see what they can do.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Liama, do you agree with that assertion that Macky Sall government was not flirting with the idea, but from what Dr. Sani is saying, that he said what the wheel of change was already blowing. So whether the presidential candidate was in jail or not, the wheel of change was still going to get him elected.
I think so, because you could see some of the struggles that they've had with Sonko coming along, the trials and the detention and all that stuff. But yeah, people were agitated, and I think that the change was coming, and it was probably inevitable. And I think that's you have to give. So I still think that Macky Sall was toying with the idea, even though he announced that he wasn't going to run for a third term. You shouldn't even be part of the equation. You are term limited. It shouldn't even be in the discussion. Nobody should ask you. Nobody should wait for you to say, I'm not going to run, because the Constitution says you can't run. So that should be a settled matter. You shouldn't leave it hanging out and all those things. Am I going to run or not run?
No, but there were the wheel of change, which was unconstitutional change in government happening across the continent. So why not try my hands on see what I can?
Not him. That's what I'm saying, that not him. When you come to power promising to fight for democracy, I don't want to see that. So if you go to a place like Chad, Chad is not a democracy. Chad is a dictator's son succeeding their father. I don't expect anything from there. But in Senegal, I expect you to deliver. The bar is high over there. So I don't expect you to play any kind of word game and all that stuff. But it was clear that people were ready for change. And even though the main candidate was prevented from running, the successor won that election. And that's a vindication that you can't stop these things. African leaders, have to understand that there comes a time when you cannot take the people for granted. And unfortunately, as I said, I'm very proud of what Senegal was able to do. And we also have to give Macky Sall credit for eventually allowing the process to go through, because that's not always, it's not always guaranteed that a leader is going to say, all right, I'm going to allow the process to go through. So he allowed it to go through. You give him credit for that. Same with Liberia, where, yes, George Weah hung over but he lost the election and he didn't contest. A lot of African countries, look at the United States. Donald Trump lost an election and he refuses to accept that he lost. So you still have to give these leaders credit for accepting and saying, all right, I'm going to step aside and allow the new person to take over. But I think that young people in Africa are tired of being taken for granted. In some places, they've been successful. They've been successful in Senegal. I'd like to see success in Nigeria as well. Success in Ghana as well, where young people who are tired, of waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for change. I want to see them be successful in getting one of their candidates elected. And it means that you have to learn how to organize. You have to, resist the temptation of joining an older established power, which usually happens, right? Because they get co-opted. Look at that Ghana, for example. Almost all of the politicians were once upon a time student leaders who were fighting against dictatorships, and then they become co-opted into political parties, and they become even more corrupt than the people that, same with NGO guys, NGO entrepreneurs, who are always fighting for democracy and inclusion, and then they join governments and they become corrupt. So I don't want to see that. I want to see young people rise to the fore, a new generation with new ideas that has the energy and the passion and understand the people. Unfortunately,
people can make the same argument that this young people issue. We can go back to the nationalist movements, right? Some of these people were young guys, passion and things like that, and they still couldn't deliver. So what is so new about this current crop of political leaders compared to back then?
What I don't like in politics is inertia.
Okay.
So I don't want. So again, Ghana, Akufo-Addo, and I'm an older guy, so I remember Akufo-Addo as a young guy. That young Akufo-Addo was an activist. He was willing to go to jail. He was willing to confront Rawlings, all those things. The Akufo-Addo that became president is an old guy. He's more of a lake, not a river. And Africa needs rivers. We need energy and we need passion. We need new ideas. You don't want people who are set in their ways, Akufo-Addo is more like, he's like a chief. He gets to the presidency. It's a reward for all of his years of struggle. He's not going to change anything, and he's just there whilst people are struggling. So you want some of those young people, but not only that, a large proportion of our citizens are young people. So they need to be represented in government as well. A lot of these countries, the median age is around 19, 20. So you want those young people in there. You want their views heard. And, there's nothing wrong with having one of them in power. I think Senegal probably has the youngest president now. Now, I'm not saying that every young person is good, because we see young leaders who were terrible. look at Gambia. Everyone when you're power, very young. And he was a terrible guy. So you can be young and bad, but that we've seen that if old people can be bad and still win power, we should give way for young people, a new generation. I wish Peter Obi stays the course in Nigeria. I hope somebody even younger, some of those young people that were protesting against SARS, they need to learn how to take that energy and turn it to political capital and learn how to organize. learn how to organize to win power, because being in the streets, yes, it highlights issues, but it usually doesn't change things. So you need to learn how to play the inside game as well. And so hopefully they all take inspiration from what happened in Senegal and say, if they can do it in Senegal, we can do it in Nigeria, we can do it in Ghana, we can do it in South Africa. Let's have a new crop of leaders, because I'm tired of rerunning the same old leaders who owe debts. That's the other thing too. You saw Akufo-Addo when he became president. His cabinet was huge, over 120 people. Why? Because he's paying back debts. He had run for president 3 times. People who have funded his campaign. He makes you a minister. Go and steal money to pay yourself. So you don't want that. You want young people who are not encumbered by debts and promises that they've made to other people. Young people usually are idealistic. Some of that idealism can be dangerous, but idealism is also good. People, because they've not been cowed by their life experiences yet, and they have visions and they have dreams. You want people that can dream and still hope for a better tomorrow in power, rather than people who are cynical, who think nothing will change and all I have to do is get rich and get my children out of here and make sure that when I leave office, they don't come for me. You don't want leaders like that. Leaders who are already comfortable. I don't want anybody who's comfortable taking power in Africa. I want people who are edgy, who feel the pain of the people, who understand that there are a lot of people suffering in Africa and they have to wake up every day promising to work for the poor people, our young people who are in the streets without jobs. Those are the people that our leaders should serve, not political fat cats who are rich, or somebody who financed their campaign, or some businessman friend in Europe who is trying to get a contract. And the social contract should not be between donors and our politicians. It should be about the people who send them there. And when they send them there and they don't deliver, those people should then get in the streets and demand change, or go and vote them out of office.
Right. Thank you very much. We are supposed to go to the last narrative, but let me ask you, Dr. Anto, one simple question. Dr. Nuyama make a comparison between Senegal and Chad. You cannot compare these two, right? In Senegal, we have a young president. In Chad, we also have a young president. But historically, if you look at what has happened in Chad, right? His father probably was in power for almost like 30 years plus. You were on the Chad program with us, right? Do you see him, right, being able, given the history of the country, the political entrepreneurship, the kind of society that they live in, right? The kind of society that Chad is, right, with a lot of arms and terrorism. Do you see him actually even completing his term of office, given what has transpired historically in that country and what is currently going on?
So you say, do you see him?
I'm saying that, do you see him making any effective change, given the fact that he is not democratic compared to the Senegalese president?
He was there for the transition in Chad, and he was the actual president, being with the Chadian citizens. And if they were able to vote for him again, that means that somewhere, somehow, they trust that he can bring more changes.
Yeah, but we know that there were a lot of election malpractices and things like that. Right, go ahead.
Right. But I think when they will have the legislative elections normally before the end of the year, we'll see already how it's going to look, because his former Prime Minister, Success Maswa, is actually going to go for those legislative elections as well, and trying to win as more seats as possible. But as you mentioned, they're on a different regime, Chad and Senegal. And I believe, like Dr. Nuyama said, age, yes, they're very young, but it doesn't mean that they can do well. That's what we wish for them, to actually do the right thing and have a very good presidency. But I can tell you that here in Senegal, Senegalese people are very demanding, and they vote for him. They vote for them. But I can tell you already, 2 months now that he's president, every day you hear Senegalese people saying, "Okay, this is what you promised to us. We haven't seen it." 2 months. So just to tell you that the dream that they sold to the youth to actually be in power, I can tell you that in 5 years, if they don't deliver, mostly on those, Senegalese people will not hesitate during the next elections to not to vote for them. That is that's a very good sign here in Senegal that people believe in democracy, and people believe in not only promising things during electoral campaign. You actually have to deliver and make people's life better. And number one is for Senegalese people to be able to feel that living is not going to be as expensive as it was before. They compare here a lot. You will see that through the past few weeks, they will bring what they said to the campaign and now what is happening. So they're watching them very carefully. It's not because they're young. Yes, they're in power, but deliver on what you say. Make the cost of buying food for people being less. When you talk about the price of rice, the price of electricity here, especially for us, we're gonna have oil and gas. So the Senegalese people are waiting to see what they're gonna do with those resources. How we're gonna see very quickly the prices of electricity go down, and etc. etc. So it's not easy. It's not easy because yes, there's a lot of hope in both of them, the prime minister as well as the president, who's his right hand man. A lot of hope that Senegalese lives are going to change, and as well as the way things are being done when it comes to good governance and transparency. Okay, to change so we can see that yes, now people will not be trying to make corruption as the foundation for so many things. So there's a lot of demand, and we're waiting to really see some hope of at least change. But people will not hesitate in 5 years to say, okay, we do not do what you said. We're going to trust someone else to do that. But in the case of these two, it was a long fight and run to have them into power. So I think that they will do everything they can not to deceive the Senegalese people, so they can have another chance to be here another term to finish up what they did. People already starting to mention and say that probably what's going to happen with the duo is he's getting the first 5 terms. If they do very well, the prime minister in the next 5 years can actually be the candidate and maybe win if they can deliver on all of these things they mentioned to Senegalese people. And in that way, if one do 5 years, the other one do another 5, then after the first one can come back again. But still,
that means we'll be heading towards the Russian style of democracy, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, even now you have many political analysts in Senegal saying really what is going on between the duo. Are we slowly moving towards a parliamentarian regime or not? Because it's the prime minister who is actually deciding most of the things that is happening. Normally he was going to be the president, but this one is the president by default. So we are actually seeing that all of these decisions, everything that is taking place is actually what the Prime Minister himself is doing.
All right. All right, thank you very much. Let's go to the last narrative, Dr. Nyambo, which I sent to you. Right. But I want to read portions of it for you to explain to our listeners what I mean, right? Dr. Suleiman Balaredi Kura, in the introductory chapter, distinguishes the emergence of Western-style Eurocentric form of political parties from that of the African political parties, stating, in Africa, political parties did not emerge as a rational choice for resolving societal, political, economic policy issues, nor were they established for proper state coordinations. Parties emerged, that means parties in Africa emerged to create the political system instead of the reverse, which is the case in most established democracies. What does he mean by that? That it is the reverse.
I can tell you he's wrong. That's not, it's factually inaccurate. So this is a structural functionalist view of the process of polka development. Polka systems are always in place. Polka parties do not create polka systems. Polka systems are always in place. Whether you have polka parties or not, it doesn't matter. Whether you have a monarchy or not, it doesn't matter. That's your polka system. So the polka system is always in place. The polka party comes later. That's the history even in Europe as well. In the European system, the polka parties came out of that process. But his argument is that in Africa, it's the reverse. The polka parties created the polka systems. That's not historically accurate. As I was telling Ghana's case, polka parties emerged out of the polka systems that was there with chiefs and the colonial government, even before colonial times. I mean, look at the Ashanti monarchy. That was a polka system. They didn't have polka parties. In the end, polka parties emerged in Ashanti region against Nkrumah's nationalization and unitary government model. That's when polka parties emerged in Ashanti to fight for the rights of Ashantis, because Nkrumah was trying to disrupt stuff in Ashanti. He split up Ashanti region, created Bronga Hafo. He passed all these laws banning sharecropping as a way of going after people like Bafo Wakuto and all those people. And so polka parties emerged out of that system. But the polka system was already, the polka system always reflects the needs of the society, and what kind of agreement the elites can negotiate. So when those needs change, new institutions are invented. It's a constructivist view of how polka parties emerge. And those new instruments emerge to help solve the problems of the society. And so it's not the other way around. I don't know what cases he cites. I'm not familiar with his research, but I don't think that it's true that polka parties in Africa created a polka system. I think he's putting the cart before the horse.
Right. Yeah, that is a more reason. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, this doesn't sound right to me, but I don't want to debate it. I want to leave it to the panelists to discuss it. Now, let me follow up with another question. If we look at the dominant parties in Africa now, you mentioned the FPLA, you mentioned other parties now, which are still running the show in Africa. Is it not back to the 1950s and 1960s? If these parties that were there before, and now we are multi-party democracy, and they are still there, are we not back in the 1950s to 1960s?
Not necessarily. As long as you can justify why people should vote for you. I don't think there's anything wrong with you being, a legacy party. And they are not the same. They may still have the same names, but they're not the same. Look at Tanzania. Chama Cha Mapinduzi. Now the president is a woman. Very different from Julius Nyerere. So the parties, even though, yes, they have the same, and they have the advantage of the legacy, and they have a founding father and all those things, they're not the same. The MPP is not the same. They come out of the Busia Danko tradition. This Akufo-Addo administration is very different. If you look at the way they've governed, they've actually leaned left. That was a party that was initially center-right. They've leaned left. So parties reinvent themselves all the time, because if they don't reinvent themselves, they will die. And in some places, founding parties have died. The CPP is dead in Ghana. But CPP is dead in Ghana. The issues that the CPP cared about having gone away, the NDC replaced them. And so parties go through all this stuff. And I don't think that just because you were the founding party, that should be a disqualifier. What disqualifies you is your inability to execute the social contract and to make life better for your people. That's the disqualifier. So if you are the same party, you were formed 100 years ago and you are delivering, because in the end, in a democratic system, and I want to stress that this is only true of democracies, the people have the final say. Now, in a system that's not democratic, that's different. A party can stay in power through all kinds of mechanisms. But if people have a free chance to choose who their government is and they vote for you, that's a vote of confidence. In other places, the vote is not even what they cast. In some places, people vote with their feet, which is the other thing of Africa. Our youth are risking their lives, leaving the continent. That's a vote of no confidence in the political elites. They have failed. People are willing to walk across the Sahara to go through Libya where they might be enslaved, to get on rickety boats where they might die because they don't want to stay in these countries that the elites have run into the ground. That's a very important vote. It's a vote of no confidence. They vote with their feet. But if you are the party running the state and you deliver, I don't care how long you were formed, how long ago you were formed. If you win the election fair and square, I support you. But you shouldn't use the fact that you are a founding, party and claim to be the only game in town, and then say because of that, anybody that votes against me is being unpatriotic. I think that's a weak argument to make. If you have you should be elected on the basis of your policies and your ability to deliver, not on the basis of the fact that you were the founding party or the party of liberation or any of those kinds of legacy stuff. That's a weak argument. But if you were a legacy party and you keep delivering and you keep reinventing yourself and you keep making your case and the people say they like you, I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me come to you, Dr. Anta. Wouldn't you also say that, you know what, the system that we have in Africa, right? Sometimes when you have political parties trying to reinvent themselves, it becomes very difficult for them to be able to sustain themselves because you have entrenched interest, right? That you have to shift away from, which sometimes is very, very difficult to do. You have to be able to satisfy those entrenched interests, either ethnic interest or maybe sectional interest. These interests are there and they are always pulling you from all corners. So it becomes very, very difficult for political parties to reinvent themselves.
I agree. It does. It does. It becomes very difficult. And I would say as religion, I know in case of Senegal, it's very predominant as well. And we should lead towards, again, like I mentioned earlier, having values and norms and allowing to reinvent and actually get out of the ethnic or sectorial interests to be able to move forward, to be able to ensure that countries become more and more democratic, to be able to allow the system to continue in a transparent and peaceful way. It's very important because if we just stick to having the reality, unfortunately, of ethnicity or sectorial being predominant, we risk of not being able, as Dr. Nwama said, to actually continuing to see this wind of change of young people actually being able to lead the continent.
Right, thank you. Dr. No, do you agree with that? that this ethnic interest and sectoral interest, sectional interest, sometimes make it very, very difficult for political parties to reinvent themselves. Let's look at the case of the NPP in the Ashanti region, right? You gave us the background of how it was formed, the Ashanti region, right? That has made the NPP, it has made it very, very difficult for the NPP to transform itself. For example, we see what is happening in terms of the vice president, and they are still struggling to get a candidate because for them, the vice president should come from the Ashanti region. And that is the bane of Dr. Bawumia right now. He's now between a rock and a hard place in terms of who to choose. Because in the past, they have always chosen an Akan as a president. But this time they have a Northerner as a president, and they are the sectional interest that we have to get a vice president, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so that may be true, but let me correct the record on that, because the NPP is not a homogeneous Akan party. They have Akufo-Addo, for example. Akufo-Addo is an Achim guy. The Achims and Ashantis don't get along. So they've already gone through a transformation where they've elected an Achim guy against Alan Kyerematen, who's Ashanti. Akufo-Addo beat him in the last election. Remember, Kufuor, who's an Ashanti president, didn't endorse him. And the fight, I don't want to go deep down to Ghanaian polka history, but the genesis of that fight goes back to the fight between Victor Owusu and William Ofori-Atta, who's Akufo-Addo's because William Ofori-Atta, when he lost the nomination to an Ashanti guy, Victor Owusu, decided to then form a third party, the UNC, and took votes away from the Ashanti candidate and cost Victor Owusu the election. That's how Liman became president. And so there's no love lost between the Achims and the Ashantis. I know people who are not Akans think that all Akans are the same, but they're not. They're not a homogeneous group. Their greatest king was the Osebunsu was killed by the Achim people. They shot him over the Pra River. So they don't get along, and this is why Kufuor didn't endorse Akufo-Addo. But still, the party always has to decide what's in its best interest, and so they're going to go with the candidate. I think that this is the rational choice view of this stuff. They're going to go with the candidate that gives them the best shot at retaining the presidency. So in the last cycle, it was Akufo-Addo. They voted, including the Ashanti delegates, they voted against Alan Kyerematen. They went with Akufo-Addo. And Akufo-Addo delivered the presidency. Now you have Bawumia, who is being pushed. Bawumia may not be the best candidate, but he's the person that the current elites, Akufo-Addo and co, have decided that they want to retain. And I think that that's a good thing, because you don't also want a situation where these parties use northern candidates, because they've done that. We've had tokenism in Ghanaian politics where they pick guys. So people like Aliu Mahama and all these people, they run them and then they throw them away. So I like the fact that they retained Bawumia. He's going up against another northerner. By the way, these people are nominally northerners because they are both children of political elites. Both Mahama and Bawumia, their parents go back to Nkrumah's days. Mahama grew up in Accra. He went at Chimoda Boarding School. His father was a minister in Nkrumah's party. Bawumia's father was another elite who worked with the Nkrumah government, all that stuff. So these are not really, because usually when we talk about northerners, we're talking about people who represent impoverished communities. These are not the guys. These are rich people who are only claiming the northern mantle, but it's still fine. You need inclusivity. And so, yes, visually it's important to see somebody from the north running for that. But again, it also makes sense to balance the ticket. So you're trying to win elections. So it makes sense to balance the ticket. The NPP's, so-called World Bank is the Ashanti region. So it doesn't make sense to go you already have a minority person at the top of the ticket. It doesn't make sense to go pick somebody else from another minority group that cannot deliver the votes. That's where the bulk of your votes are. Those people who are the ones who are going to come out and vote for you. You need to, tell them that I see you, I hear you. It makes sense to pick somebody from there to balance the ticket. I wish he would pick the woman, because that's the other thing too. We don't have space for women in the Ghanaian polka system. Mahama's chosen a woman. It would be nice to see Bawumia also pick a woman. So
but recent reporting say that the vice president is choosing somebody from KNUST, right?
I haven't heard.
Yes, the vice chancellor of KNUST. Yeah, go ahead.
Whoever it is, I hope that person is not somebody that's being put on the ticket. If it's a woman, I don't want the tokenism as well, where they put you there because of a woman. There are a lot of women who are qualified, who can help you win an election. Don't pick somebody, and then not give them a real role in the government. They have to be part of that coalition. So maybe this is an opportunity for Ghana to move forward. Look at Mexico just elected a woman president. That's because both of the two top candidates were women. So maybe this is where we need to go. If Bawumia has any good advice, says if you have a way of reaching him, call him and tell him, hey, look, we did a party, pick a woman, and then let's go. And then give that woman a real chance to participate in the governance process so they can, be ready next time. Be ready next time. That's the thing. You need to have them in the pipeline, in the system, in terms of mentorship, training, all that stuff. So they are ready. Bawumia has a woman on their ticket and he loses, then that woman goes to the head of the ticket next time around. If he wins, he has a vice president who's a woman who will be ready next time. And so that's how the system needs to grow. Every system needs to grow or it will die.
Yeah, Dr. Anta, you agree with Dr. Nyama's submission, right? Because I know you have been working on women issues. So you agree with his submission that we should have a lot of women in top positions like that?
I do agree with Dr. Nyama. It's very important because what you see is most of the time, what actually happens when it comes to women, decision being taken about women without them being on the table. And I agree with him 100%. We need to work and have actually more women in the pipeline so that within the cabinets of the president's office or whether within government, we should have more women ministers, because it's very sad that you will see a government with 30, 40 people, and you will only see about 5, 7, 8 women within those governments. So the idea of having that pipeline and really preparing them for next elections is very important, as well as changing the mentalities. And it depends as well on the culture and traditions of most of our African countries, unfortunately, that are still thinking to some extent that we don't progress, of course. We still need to do more to allow more women to actually be sitting around the table to be candidates and to have a say within what's going on within the country. In our most recent election, we had a young candidate, and it was not easy for her because everybody was telling her pretty much there is no way in Senegal that you're going to see a woman being president. But in the same way that nobody thought 4 months back or last year that we will have a president who's 44 years old, we should also not say that there won't be one in the next couple of years. So,
all right, thank you very much. Time is fast spent, right? So I want you to give me your closing remarks. In the context of should we allow the political market space to determine the number of political parties that participate in elections, or should there be policy to try to regulate those parties which are more political entrepreneurs or who are just there for leverage? Dr. Nyama, your concluding remarks on that.
I'm a believer in the power of the political marketplace. Let the market decide, but there should be rules. So you should, the same way as markets regulate stuff. So for example, if you want to sell orange juice, the market shouldn't say, oh, we can only have 1 or 2 orange juice sellers. But then there should be rules about what kind of the quality of orange juice that you sell. You shouldn't just, sell any poison, any stuff in there. So there should be rules about who gets to operate. There should be public accountability about where you get your money and how you elect your leaders, your internal democracy. There should be some place where the same thing, when you start in a company, you have to apply for permits and you have to register, and there has to be a public audit and all that stuff. But I won't cap the number of parties. I'll just say, here are the rules. If you're going to be a poker party, you need to, get people to sign up. You need to register. You need to publish your books. You need to post the people who are the leaders of the party and how they are elected in the interest of full transparency, so that people know what it is that you stand for. And so you got to have that. And then you trust the people to decide. If you are a Mickey Mouse party, nobody's going to vote for you. There are parties that even their people from their own family don't vote for. Yeah, and there are cases like that. I can tell you cases like that in Ghana, where somebody had a party, he was running for president, and he didn't, even members of his own family didn't vote for him. United States.
General Eskin. I remember
General Eskin, very good. General Eskin. But even in the United States, look at Robert Kennedy Jr.
Jr., correct.
His own family came out and said, we're not voting for him, we supported Joe Biden. So I always trust the wisdom of the electorate. The people are not idiots. If you are a Mickey Mouse party, if you are some kind of a con man, they're not going to vote for you. They may take your money, but they're not going to vote for you. But there has to be regulation. So we don't want drug dealers, for example, bringing money from shady places and starting polka parties. We don't want terrorists starting polka parties. There has to be some rules, but let the market decide. Once you meet the minimum requirements, then let the people vote for you. If they vote for you, God bless you. If they don't vote for you and you still want to hang around and waste your own money, that's fine. Some people do that. Some people are just doing, they just want to have a platform to, essentially put ideas in the system. They don't necessarily think they're going to win elections, but they want to contribute to the polka discourse, and that is their right. And I think that we are all better for it.
Thank you very much. Right. So let's come to that. Your closing remarks in the context of what Dr. Nuama said. But in this case, you advocate for dominant parties not to stop other parties from contesting elections, correct?
Yeah, I agree with him 100%. And we are a good example of it. Okay, if the Senegalese people decided who is going to be the next president, and it should be that way, but with regulation, as he mentioned, making sure that you have rules and regulations around, and not preventing people just because you don't want them to be into power, or maybe you're afraid they're going to win. Give them a chance, and make sure as well that you follow the rules for that give people a chance to be able to they feel that they can make their countries better, yes, and leave the people to actually trust the people. And like you said, things are changing in most of African countries. People, the citizens are no longer citizens that you can just come and dump many things or force them to accept something. No, they have a voice. They have very strong voices, and they will not take no for an answer. Things have really changed. And if you don't do that, then you will see what's going to happen. They will fight for it. And that's what we've seen in Senegal. They were very resilient this past 4 years, even though they were saying no, even though there were so many things that prevent them from actually being into power today. They resisted. They were resilient. They resisted, and they make them believe that yes, we can do that. We can bring about changes. And this time, it had to be a little bit more. We were not used to that much violence that we've seen, but it was the price for them in order to be able to be in power today.
All right, thank you very much. Right. So on this note, we've come to the end of another Sankofa African series. Let me take the opportunity to thank Dr. Okunyama, who is joining us for the first time from Washington, D.C., a Ghanaian. I wish we would have him another time to talk about
Hey,
politics.
just before you continue, let me clarify something so that we don't leave the wrong impression about the Erskine vote.
Correct.
Right. So General Erskine, he was a victim of rigging because the polling station where he cast his vote with his family, he got 0 there.
Zero.
And I remember him saying on television, "For whom did I cast my vote?" So he himself voted that he got 0 there. So he was a victim of rigging. So I just want to clarify that because people don't think that his whole family, because he didn't vote against himself. At least I hope not.
All right.
Just to clarify that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anyama, right? We hope to have you one-on-one to talk about issues on the African continent, right? There's a lot of things going on in Ghana with the Attorney General, with the coming election. We would like to have you again to deliberate some of these issues. And Dr. Anta Seni, this is your third time appearing on the show. She's been a co-host of the program. We thank you very much. We look forward to having more of you on this program as a way of educating our diasporans, Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the continent, right, about issues that are plaguing the continent, so that we bring different perspectives to help some of our politicians or our state leaders, right, to look at alternative way of solving some of the problems on the continent. So on this note, I say a big thank you for Sankofa African series. Hoping to see you another time. On this note, we say goodbye and enjoy the rest of your weekend. We meet next week, Friday. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank
And
you.
Dr. Anta, nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.